Hello and welcome everyone to our South by Southwest panel, Truth to Power, bringing restorative justice to the cannabis industry. Of course, we are so saddened that we can't be with you all in person in Austin this year, but we hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy. And we're so grateful to have this opportunity today to talk to you about the work that we do at Last Prisoner Project. My name is Sarah Gersten, and I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel for the Last Prisoner Project. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to criminal justice reform through reimagining our nation's failed approach to the war on drugs and cannabis laws and policy. I am so thrilled to be here today with three fantastic panelists: our founder, Steve D'Angelo, LPP Program Associate Evelyn LaChapelle, and LPP constituent Stephanie Shepard. I'd like to start off today with you, Steve. You are a longtime seasoned activist and advocate and entrepreneur in this industry. And it was you that really had the vision and inception for the Last Prisoner Project. So I would love for you to tell us about how you came to founding this project.
Well, the vision for our Last Prisoner Project came to me in 2017. This was after the voters of California had approved total adult use legalization of cannabis, but before the law actually took place. And like a lot of cannabis company executives, I found myself in Toronto, which is these days known as the capital of cannabis capital, seeking capital, seeking funds to expand Harborside, which is the company I worked for at that time, in preparation of this huge market that was going to open up. And one afternoon, I found myself at the top floor of a very impressive skyscraper in Toronto's financial district, sitting at a conference table that felt like it was about a half mile long, a view all out over the city, and a table surrounded by some of the most powerful people in the cannabis capital markets. And it had been a really great day. We were looking at projections and numbers, and we were envisioning, moving tons and tons and tons of cannabis. So it'd been a good day. There was a really good feeling in the room. And towards the end of the day, my phone started buzzing. And, typically I wouldn't go out of a meeting like that. But in this case, it was my buddy Chuck, who was calling me from a correctional facility in Pennsylvania, where he had been imprisoned for 4 years for conspiracy to transport 12 pounds of cannabis, maybe it was 14 pounds, from California to Pennsylvania. And I ran out into the hallway to take the call. And like, any call that you have with someone that you love who is in prison, it's grim. It's really hard to be on the other end of those calls. Probably not as hard as it is for prisoners. But when I walked back into the room, that sadness and that grimness was clinging to me, and I was just struck in the disparity between what was happening with my friend Chuck, who was doing 4 years for a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of the amount of cannabis that we were talking about around that conference table. And nobody, not one soul at that conference table had any fear of being arrested or going to prison. So I knew that just being who I am, that for me I had to start working on getting my friend Chuck out and all the other people who are in prison on cannabis charges, if I'm going to be out participating in this industry and creating prosperity, in some cases creating wealth. So that's when I decided to form the Last Prisoner Project, and with a simple purpose of making sure that as we grow this legal cannabis industry, which is like all over the world now, that we don't leave behind our sisters and brothers, people who are still behind bars for doing exactly the same things that people like me do every single day.
And I think it's so important. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to be speaking on this panel, to be bringing all of your voices to the South by Southwest community today, is that if you haven't had that experience of yourself facing the injustice of the criminalization of cannabis, or a friend or a family member. So many people in this country, in the cannabis community, even when I'm speaking with stakeholders and actors in the criminal legal system, have no idea that this is an ongoing problem, that we have an estimated 40,000 individuals still incarcerated for cannabis related offenses just in the US, that despite widespread legalization, there is somebody arrested in the US for cannabis every minute. And so it's so important, critically important, that we raise awareness about this issue, because actually reforming our cannabis laws can be a really critical tool to address a lot of the issues our country is grappling with in terms of our criminal legal system. And we also know that there are so many ways that marijuana can be the catalyst for somebody interacting with the criminal legal system that go unaccounted for. So I'm so glad, of course, Steve, that you brought your experience to bear on this project, bringing your passion to this project and to the industry. And I'm especially glad that we are bringing into the LPP family individuals like Evelyn and Stephanie, who have experienced the most devastating consequences of our nation's failed approach to cannabis law and prohibition. Evelyn, you have really been on a journey, especially since I met you in 2019. I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about where you were a decade ago and how you come to be a program associate with the Last Prisoner Project.
I would love to, Sarah. And thank you for that explanation that you just gave, because I find that everyone is really surprised when I say I was just in prison for cannabis. My co-defendant was just serving life for cannabis. And I think that the message that I'm always trying to get out, across to the masses, is that there are still 40,000 people, and the incarcerated population often goes unthought of, right? And so thank you both, you and Steve, for pushing that message forward, because for a while I was a part of the forgotten population, the incarcerated population that no one is thinking about. And so, the background is, in 2013, I was convicted in a federal court along with Natalia Wade and Corvain Cooper for depositing cannabis profits into my bank account. I was then sentenced to 87 months in prison. That's 7 years and 3 months. And those 87 months did not come easily. I served a total of 5 years, 3 months in custody. I was blessed enough to receive a year off for good behavior, because I'm such a stand-up citizen, and then another year off because, and Stephanie will speak to this, the prison system rewards you for acknowledging that your cannabis usage was an addiction. And so by completing the drug program and admitting that it is, a harmful drug and you're addicted to it, you receive a year off from prison. And so for that, you can't turn down that opportunity. And during prison, so many losses. I was without my child, who was 4 years old when I left, lost my stepmother, and the amount of stress that this caused my mother, who now had to tend to my child and all of my affairs and really pick up the pieces of my life. Just the stress that caused on the entire family. I quickly learned that the judge did not just sentence myself to those 87 months, but he sentenced my entire family to serve that time with me. And it was not an easy process, for sure. And then I was released, from custody February the 1st, 2019, not with the intentions of becoming an advocate. My intentions were very clear: come home. You are a criminal, come home and pick up the responsibilities of being an adult and move on with your life. And those were my intentions. And I was on my way to completing that when I was hired as a sales and catering coordinator at a very prominent hotel here in San Francisco, and really just super excited to get all of this behind me until a coworker Googled my name and I was asked to pack up my belongings. And what that does to you, just sort of, nail in the coffin that you are undeserving. And luckily, it was a few months later, I was introduced to Last Prisoner Project through Corvain Cooper. And my work with you, Sarah, and really that first interview with Steve really shifted the way that I viewed my conviction, right? I went from thinking and wearing and bearing the guilt and the shame to realizing that I was really a victim of unjust laws. And while this country and these states are taking these steps to legalize this plant, making huge profits off of this plant, there was no one thinking about those of us who were still incarcerated for this plant. And there is no other way of making a population feel unheard and unseen than to legalize the very crime that they're in prison for and not open the doors. And so it was really my first conversation, sitting down and realizing that there's somebody fighting for this, that there's someone advocating for this. There's an organization and a group of people who are really interested in those of us who are sitting behind bars, that my ideas started to shift and I became an advocate. And I am so honored to be in a space to work on behalf of those who are still incarcerated.
Well, thank you, Evelyn. And we are so grateful to have you, and you are doing a phenomenal job. And we will circle back to the work that you're doing with Last Prisoner Project later. But first, I want to hear from you, Stephanie. I think for so many people, and even for myself, first hearing Evelyn's story, you think this must be a fluke. Someone to get sentenced to 87 months for a minor role in a cannabis offense, a cannabis crime. And then Evelyn says, I met so many women when I was incarcerated with the same story. And of course, you were one of those women. If you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience your experience of being incarcerated for a minor cannabis offense.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Stephanie Shepard, and in 2010, I was arrested and sentenced to 10 years for a first-time nonviolent marijuana offense. Conspiracy to distribute I can't even say it, it's so bad, 1,000 or more kilos of marijuana. This was my first incident of anything of this sort, so I definitely didn't feel it would be that drastic. I thought maybe I'll pay a fine, maybe I'll, do some community service, maybe probation. No, they hit me with the full 10 years, and I did 9 of those years. I got a year off for the drug program because, like Evelyn said, you don't get rewarded for not having a drug addiction. So you go in and you say, yes, I smoke marijuana. Yes, it's bad. Yes, I'm bad. Fix me. Just because you want that year off. And I initially had no intentions of doing that. I said, you have already made me into, in society's eyes, a drug dealer. Now you are also going to have me admit to being a drug addict to a plant that does nothing but good for me. And as my father began to get sicker and older, I panicked. I wanted to get out earlier. So I had to put that pride behind me and say, okay, whatever you want, just let me out. And unfortunately, I did not get out in time. My father passed away before I got a chance to go to the drug program. But I was so just over the whole system. I just wanted out. And luckily, I went to the same program with Evelyn, and she pretty much helped me get through that thing, because to stand up every day and say you're a drug addict and this plant has cost you so much in your life, if you're like, no, it didn't actually. They're like, well, why are you in jail? Well, because the laws are not right, but no, it's not anything that I did, but it is a heavy burden to carry. So once I got out, I got out, my father was no longer here. So just having to get your life in order and try to do that quickly, because they want you to do it quick. You're supposed to be able to get out of jail for 10 years, or in some people's cases, 25 years. In the case of Michael Thompson, 25 years. So they want to drop you and just say, here, make your life right. And it's almost just a really big setup for failure. So once I did get out, I got permission to go hear Evelyn speak in San Francisco to tell her story at a LPP event. And I went and I just saw the way her story affected people. And that at that moment, I was like, I definitely, if ever given the chance, would love to tell my story and talk to other people just about the experience and where it came from and where it's going.
And we are so grateful for both of you sharing your story. I know it's something I've heard from each of you, that telling your story and the reception that you get, because people immediately are shocked, are stunned at how broken our justice system is, of what it took from each of you for a plant medicine. But I also know and have heard from you both that it does help to get that reception, to undo some of that trauma, that stigma that was attached to you by our criminal legal system. I mean, it, for someone like you, Steve, that is in the industry, you know, day in and day out, you are legally selling this plant for the benefit, you know, when you first entered the industry, of medicinal patients, you know, the healing powers of this plant. To hear what Evelyn and Stephanie went through, and particularly that piece of having to go through a drug addiction program to lessen their sentence. I mean, do you see the steps forward that this community, this industry is taking, being able to undo some of that stigma? And how can we, as a group, as a community, further work to undo that stigma that unfortunately is still attached to this plant?
Well, thank you, Steph, and thank you, Evelyn, for sharing this, you know, really difficult territory. It's horrifying to me, and deeply, deeply enraging. To, you know, there's so many parts of this story that are horrifying and enraging. But what I think these stories bring home that many people aren't in touch with is the psychological trauma, the ritual humiliation, the calculated stripping of a sense of self-worth, the deliberate inculcation of a feeling of guilt. And the system is designed to do that from the time that you're arrested until you go to your trial, until you go into being imprisoned. You are treated like an animal. You are referred to as a number or as a profanity. All of you're just attacked. You're attacked by guards. You're attacked by the programs. You're attacked by what the judge says to you in the courtroom. And you know, so what I noticed, and it's not a surprise to me because I've been through the system enough times myself, was that most of our constituents on coming out of the prison experience were really deeply wounded. And one of the things that I noticed, and I'm still noticing it today, is that that many people who are released from prison on cannabis charges talk about the bad choices that they made. They talk about the suffering that they inflicted on their family. They talk about the need to become mature, to grow up, to pay their debts. And for me as a cannabis activist, this is especially enraging, that our people's sense of self-worth and pride is so systematically attacked and torn away, because that's something that, you know, you get out of prison eventually, but if your sense of self-worth as a human being has been so damaged, if you're carrying this tons and tons of guilt around you for the rest of your life, that's really, a, a harm that lasts a lot longer. It lasts forever. So I think that one of the things that I hope that we can do as an organization, and one of the things that I hope to see spread, is an understanding that the people who were arrested on cannabis charges and locked up, we're not the victims, right? We're never criminals, right? The real criminals are the people who enacted these laws and enforced them, especially enforced them with such deliberate cruelty. So stuff upsets me so much, I'll tell you. I mean, it just rattles me every time I hear the story. What have we done as an industry and at healing this? Frankly, I don't think that this part of the trauma of prison is something that very many people are aware of. Even our constituents who get out of prison sometimes aren't completely self-aware of what's been inflicted upon them. So I think we have a ways to go in that conversation, but talk about progress. And we have just seen in since we launched the Last Prisoner Project, the legal cannabis industry really open its arms and embrace our mission, and give us the resources that we need to have the kind of months that we had in January, where we saw so many of our constituents released. I lost count of it. I'm sure you didn't, Sarah, and you can fill us in. So I'm very heartened by that, but I'm also very aware of the magnitude of the task that's before us. Even with all that we've accomplished in this first year or two, we've only been able to free a tiny, tiny fraction of the people that we have made a sacred promise to free. And so we have a lot farther to go. What we've done this year is prove that we can do it. It is possible, that not only do we have the passion for this mission, but we also have the resources to carry it out. It's not just a noble cause. It's something we're going to get done.
Absolutely. Like Steve said, we have a promise that we have made to every last cannabis prisoner, and we're not going to rest. We're not going to stop until they are free. But as we know at Last Prisoner Project, and Evelyn, Stephanie, as you both articulated, full freedom for us doesn't just mean release from prison. And to your point, Steve, it also involves undoing that harm and that trauma, that stigma that was placed on our constituents while they were incarcerated. And Evelyn, I have been so thrilled to see you in your role as a program associate at LPP, because a huge part of what you're doing day in and day out is working with our constituents to help them reintegrate into society. And you both touched on how difficult that is, with the psychological trauma you're carrying. And Stephanie, you've talked about this, just building back up your confidence, being in the world, going into job interviews. Evelyn, reconnecting even with your own family after nearly a decade of imprisonment. Talk about some of the ways that we're working at LPP and that you're working to ensure that those coming out have the resources, the tools that they need to really rebuild their lives.
Absolutely. And I think one of the advantages of having walked that path is that reentry is so much more than job placement. I always refer to something that me and Stephanie learned in the program, though, was Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And it's, you can't focus on fulfilling your hopes and dreams if you have not established a safe place to live, housing. How are you going to feed your family? And Stephanie just spoke to, they release you from prison and you have 2 weeks to find a job, and it's just go. But the needs of constituents releasing from prison after a long time or a short period of time is so much more than just job placement. I need to be able to have a safe place to lay my head and for my children. And so a lot of the work that we're doing here in the reentry is offering a full host of services and resources. We've been so fortunate that folks have reached out to us wanting to offer their resources, right? And so creating a webinar space where people can learn about financial literacy and cannabis education, but then also creating a space for constituents to apply for micro grants and to meet the needs. Because coming out, your direct need might be housing, but it also might be dental, right? In prison, they don't fill cavities, they don't do root canals, they just pull your teeth. And how do you have the confidence to go into a job interview with missing teeth, right? And so there's all of these needs on a case by case that are not being met when people are released. And Stephanie will correct me, but I know when I got to the halfway house, there's no packet. It's find a job in 2 weeks, and here's a packet on where the local churches are if you want to go to church. And appreciate that, and I went to church for sure, but there is no how do you sign up for medical benefits, there is no how do you get access to housing. And so really the work that I'm doing with the reentry team is hoping to create a space where those who have been negatively impacted by the war on cannabis we can be their first contact and set them up and on their way to a maybe not smooth journey, but an easier one than what it would have been.
And you and the reentry team have done a truly phenomenal job of really building the infrastructure for this program. And I know we are grateful. Our constituents are incredibly grateful. So thank you for that work. And I know the perspective you bring, having been through that, is so critical to what you do. So thank you for that. And you touched on you come out of prison, you've lost so much. And then, as you said, they kind of shove you out the door. They are not giving you any kinds of resources. And if anything, they're really setting up barriers for you to successfully reenter. Stephanie, what is that experience like coming out of prison? I mean, you have the clothes on your back. How do you even go about trying to rebuild your life?
The good thing for me is I had a decent amount of family support. Um, a lot of people don't have that. So to even be able to go to the halfway house with deodorant, with, a change of underwear, like these are things that someone has to help you acquire. It sometimes seems like a very simple thing, but coming into the halfway house, my vision was just, this is still halfway in jail, and I don't want that. I want to be home. But it doesn't stop there, it starts there. Because then you have the ankle monitor, then I had home confinement, then I had to get a job with the ankle monitor on, then it's probation. So when I feel like I've done this time in jail and they get out and say, and you still owe us 5 more years of this, that, and the other. Really? It almost takes you back to day one. So when I got out and I had my ankle monitor on and they said, find a job, I was so nervous. I was, like I said, my confidence level was so low when I got out of prison. I hadn't even had time to digest that I was out of prison. So now I have to go in and explain to whoever that this is why my resume looks like this. This is why I can only work from this time to this time and don't ask me to stay 5 minutes later because I have to be home with the ankle monitor. So you're having to explain these things and you still haven't even digested it yourself that you're out. So once I did get my ankle monitor off, I just took a walk around the block. And I was just like, oh. Then when I got to go to San Francisco to see Evelyn speak and meet Steve and meet you, and it was just kind of set me up for the path that I want to be on in the industry that I want to be in. And the first thing that you guys asked me was, what do you need? And for me, my need is different than someone else's. My need was support, like emotional support. Having you and Mary and Steve, having you guys all not only not hold my past against me, but almost kind of celebrate me for my past and for my journey. And these are people who I look at and I'm like, these people are amazing people doing amazing things. And they are welcoming me. They are treating me like the person that I was before prison, or that I felt like I was before prison. So that was a huge step in the right direction for me. Some people, like Evelyn said, they don't have anywhere to go. They don't have that family support. They need a different type of assistance. So everybody kind of, their journey is different. So through Evelyn, knowing this, I love that she can talk to people and find out what they need and understand when they say what they need.
And I will never forget that night seeing you two in San Francisco, that photo of you two on the bay, going out to dinner. It just warms my heart. And, I think, again, that's such an important part of what we're doing is building the Last Prisoner Project family, and anyone of our constituents becomes a part of that family. And of course, we have our direct service programs, working to actually release people. But part of what Evelyn's doing with our reentry program is building that family, just letting people know we are here for you. And, it goes beyond the financial support, the job training. It's that emotional support of knowing you have a family in us. And as Steve said, you are not a criminal. You are not a felon. You are a victim. And we want to work to repair all the harm that has been done to you. So I'm, again, grateful for the both of you, because you've really put us on a path to do that for so many people. And Steve, you touched on it. We have had a tremendous amount of success in the past year, particularly this past month with our compassionate release program, our clemency program. We've seen the release of a number of our constituents. Stephanie brought up Michael Thompson. I just got back from Michigan, being there for his release from prison after serving 25 years of a de facto life sentence for selling cannabis in Michigan, which is now a fully legal state. And Evelyn, your co-defendant, Corvin Cooper, who was serving a life sentence for a nonviolent cannabis offense, was just released, received a grant of executive clemency in January. And you both were able to be there for his homecoming. Evelyn, tell us about what that experience was like.
I'll be honest, that experience was more than I thought it would be, right? I continued communications with Corvain and his faith unwavering, mine not so much, right? Because my experience with the judicial system would not even really allow me to think that that life sentence would be removed. And so to see it happen and to see the blessing, you know, with my own eyes and to see the mountains really uh, moved like just completely moved me and gave me the momentum, right, to continue this advocacy work because I'm here for those who are released. I just didn't have any faith, right, that folks would actually beat life sentences. And so there was that aspect. And then when me and Natalia and Corvain sat down and took that photo, the co-defendants, it was also the end of that chapter for me. It was like as if we had all three of us have walked out of something that was so devastating. And for so long, I only thought two of us were walking out of that. And so to see him with his girls and to sit down and for the first time sit down since we all heard, like the last time we sat down, we heard the jury say guilty and that was it. And so to see him release, it was definitely a spiritual blessing that I will carry with me forever to you know, because he says I was buried alive. Like they really wanted him to die in prison over this plant that was just deemed essential. And so to see that blessing of freedom and then to also be able to close that chapter on my story and really look forward and not backwards anymore has been amazing. I mean, there are no words, right? And Stephanie, and I'm so glad Stephanie was with me because I'm so glad that I was able to physically be there and witness that.
And seeing not only you and Natalia, the co-defendants there, but Stephanie, Dante Westmoreland, another one of our constituents, it just is so emblematic of exactly what you just said. You all are a part of this family, and that doesn't just mean the support is flowing one way, right? You all, it's been so incredible to see every one of our constituents stepping up to then give that support to the next constituent. And you're building this family and it's growing rapidly. So for me, and I'm sure for Steve, to see you all have that experience and to be there for each other was just incredible. And I'm so glad that you got to experience that. And so we, you know, are of course are cherishing these moments. But as people are coming out, it's another area of the law that I think hits me so hard, and I know for Steve as well, and of course for you both because you've experienced it. And Stephanie, you touched on this, coming out and being on supervised release. And it's another piece of why full freedom for us, it doesn't end when you walk out of the prison doors. And I think that's another crucial piece of the work that we're doing, especially in terms of our policy work. Because when we talk about already the number of 40,000 individuals incarcerated, those are 40,000 lives. Evelyn, as you said, that nexus is larger than just the individual incarcerated. It's their family, their friends, their community. But that doesn't speak to all of the ways that the criminalization of cannabis affects people in this country, and particularly our Black and Brown communities. When you come out, typically you'll be on supervised release. And even someone like Michael Thompson, who has served 25 years for a nonviolent marijuana crime, is coming out and he's on 4 more years of parole. And so that's something we are actively fighting against in Michael's case, but it speaks to the need for really more broader systemic reform, not just on the issue of arresting, sentencing, and incarcerating individuals for cannabis, but there are so many more areas of our criminal legal system that need to be reformed. I do feel hopeful, tentatively hopeful, that 2021 is going to be a real inflection point for the reformation, not just of our criminal legal system, but of our cannabis laws and policy. We have seen a huge amount of progress on the state level, especially in terms of clean slate initiatives, expungement laws tied to marijuana, automatic expungement. Um, Legalization, of course, is becoming more and more widespread. And it's been really heartening to see that as newer states legalize, they really are ensuring that things like expungement and social equity are a part of their legalization. Um, but I do think that we might see some more traction federally. In at the very end of 2020, we saw the House pass the MORE Act, which was the first federal bill to deschedule cannabis, but also have those provisions for resentencing and for social equity. So I'm feeling hopeful, and I know just in the past weeks, we've seen Majority Leader Schumer come together with senators on the Hill really to prioritize federal legalization. Again, that is tied to things like restorative justice and social equity. But Steve, I'm curious, you have been an activist in this community, in this industry for decades. I am sure there are moments where you have felt really hopeful, perhaps only to be let down. Do you feel like 2021 could really be a moment for reform on the federal level?
Well, I think we need to be real about this moment, and what's going on. There's a tremendous amount of popular support for changing the cannabis laws, but we just elected an administration where the president and the vice president both have a long record of being cannabis warriors on the wrong side of the war. Biden was the person who was responsible for the three strikes out law at the federal level that allowed people like Corvine Cooper to be imprisoned for life. And Kamala Harris, as Attorney General of California, was responsible for the directly or indirectly the imprisonment of many, many, many people in this state. And to make matters worse, when the federal government came in 2011 to try and close down California's legal cannabis industry, our attorney general did nothing to stop them. On the other hand, I think that Biden and Harris are both creatures of the political center. They are, at the end of the day, basically opportunists who want to make sure that their careers are furthered. And right now, the center, not only of the Democratic Party, but the center of American political life is firmly pro-legalization. You know, look what just happened in the last general election cycle. We had 5 cannabis reform initiatives on the ballot in different states. They all won. The remarkable thing is they won it in places like Mississippi and New Jersey, right? States that were deep, deep red states and also, you know, deeply blue states. And the same thing had happened in the 2016 election cycle. So there's really only one bipartisan political consensus in American political life today, and that's a strong disposition to be in favor of cannabis reform. Um, they will go as far as we push them. And so it's going to be up to us now to really think about what we can do. You know, what we saw with the MORE Act is that it passed. And once it passed, basically all of the representatives who passed it felt like they had done their job on cannabis for a while and didn't really need to do very much else. And that's not acceptable for us for the reasons we've been talking about here, because there's 40,000 people whose lives are still being brutalized in the way that Stephanie's and Evelyn's were. So waiting is not an option. And I think that the cannabis reform movement really needs to call on the Biden administration now to take the actions that they can take without Congress. And there's a lot of things they could do. The president has the power to completely deschedule cannabis, take it out of the Controlled Substances Act entirely with the stroke of a pen. Right? The president has the ability to release every single cannabis prisoner in the federal system immediately with a stroke of the pen. So if the Biden administration is really going to talk seriously about national reconciliation, about building unity, then they need to do something about our 40,000 constituents. They need to fix a system in which one American is being arrested every minute on cannabis charges. And there are things that they can do right now with a stroke of a pen.
And we certainly are going to keep pushing for this administration, for this new Congress to enact those changes to the law and policy. And I know one thing that you touched on that really is at the intersection of what we do and broader criminal justice reform is the clemency power. I think the last administration, while of course we were so heartened to see so many of our constituents be granted clemency, it was really a showing of how ineffective that power and inequitably that power has been wielded, not just by the Trump administration, but really, for decades, the clemency power has fallen into disrepair. And so I think we're seeing a broad push from across the criminal justice sector to reform how clemency is utilized, bring it outside of the Department of Justice. I mean, it's sort of the height of injustice that the individuals who would be looking to give second chances are the same ones that were those prosecuting people in the first place. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for that reformation to happen while prioritizing those who are, some of the most deserving people with these egregious sentences for something that is now legal. And of course, it shocks the conscience. And as we say, we feel it's a moral imperative that we get our cannabis prisoners home and free, because nobody should remain incarcerated while others are profiting off of cannabis. So I am hopeful that we will see those changes happen. And as you said, Steve, I think we really have seen this industry step up to get behind this effort, while imperfect. But I'm curious to hear ways in which you think this industry, this community can really rally together to support those kinds of pieces of reform. And if you think particularly the industry will be able to truly take that on.
Well, I'd be happy to do that. But first, I want to just rewind our conversation a little bit. And, Stephanie mentioned feeling celebrated. And that's exactly the feeling that I think that our constituents should feel if we're doing our jobs right. I also was a little bit troubled, honestly, as we were talking about our constituents being victims. And I think that I've come to the point where I don't really look at it that way. I consider our constituents to be heroes. They were the people who, at the height of the darkness of prohibition, had the courage to carry this plant of enlightenment through those dark years. They are heroes, and maybe some of them thought they were doing it for the gold. But what I know is that Mother Earth is working through all of us right now. She's calling us to a common mission. She uses a lot of different tricks in calling us to that mission. Sometimes we don't always know why we're doing things until later on. But every single cannabis prisoner in the world is a hero, and they should be celebrated. And one day, this 100 years where humanity willingly divorced itself from the most valuable plant on the planet is going to be recognized as the bizarre aberration in history that it really is. So what else can we do? Well, there's, tons of things that can be done. Cannabis prisoners are getting released from prison every day. We've heard about the situations that they face when they get out. Very simple thing that any cannabis company can do is go to their HR department and ask the HR department to do outreach and make the hiring of released prisoners a high priority. That's one thing that could be done right away. And they also have some great programs at Last Prisoner Project, which have been growing nicely, but could really grow a lot more. You know, we have 130 now, or has it grown, dispensaries nationwide that are participating in our Roll It Up for Freedom campaign, where it's really simple. We just ask cannabis consumers to donate the change from their purchase, round it up to the next dollar or the next $5 if they're feeling generous, and then that money flows to LPP, and it's small change, but it adds up to a really big impact in terms of letting us have the resources that we need to get the work done. Um, you know, we just saw an incredible thing happen with Michael Thompson when he was released, where the community came together in a variety of different ways. But you know, most dramatically, Sean King publicized Michael's story on his platform, and we are able to raise a GoFundMe campaign that raised $266,000 for Michael in the space of a day. So he's now gone from that prison to his own home. And that's, you know, but that's not the only thing, right? We had catering companies who came and made Michael really beautiful, lovely food and came. And I've now heard that there's gardening companies that want to come and help him make a garden. And so I would encourage cannabis companies to make yourself aware when cannabis prisoners are getting out of prison. Help them with their GoFundMe campaigns, populate that. Um, you know, we've seen other cannabis companies really make, you know, very deep commitments to LPP by setting up co-branding deals where they're actually creating products and a portion of the revenue from those products flows back to Last Prisoner Project. There's almost no end to the number of ways that you can help. The best way to find out more is get in touch with our amazing director, our managing director, Mary Bailey, at lastprisonerproject.org.
Well, that was perfect, Steve, and absolutely for companies, for individuals that want to learn more, find out ways to get involved as Steve. The ways are really endless. You can check out our websites, www.lastprisonerproject.org. I want to thank so much Steve D'Angelo, our founder, and our heroes, Evelyn LaChapelle and Stephanie Shepard. Thank you both so much. What you have done here today is so inspiring, and I know are going to change the hearts and minds of so many. And together we are going to see the day when the last cannabis prisoner is truly free. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.